Greetings, everyone. Dr. Brian Scott with you. Today is a brand new week of insight to the end times. Thanks for joining us today. We're in the middle of May, or almost in the middle of May, and we're studying out of 2 Timothy chapter 3. The Apostle Paul wrote Timothy, who was pastoring the church in Ephesus, one of the brand new New Testament churches in the first century. And he said, hey, Timothy, in the last days, perilous times are going to come. Well, we're in those last days because that refers to the very last of the last of the last. And we're in those days, according to Scripture, according to everything we see occurring in the world today. And we're seeing perilous times, which means exceedingly dangerous. Now, when Paul wrote about this, he said, let me give you some illustrations. So here's what he said to Timothy. In verse 2, he said, first of all, men will be lovers of themselves. Then they'll also be lovers of money. And they'll be boasters, and they'll be proud, and they'll be blasphemers, and they'll be disobedient to parents. They will be unthankful and unholy. Verse 3, as if that wasn't enough, he goes on, and he says, they'll be unloving, unforgiving, they'll be slanderers, they'll have no self-control, they'll be brutal, and despisers of good. And then in verse 4, he continues and adds some more qualifications or some more categories. He says they'll be traitors, they'll be headstrong, they'll be haughty, they'll be lovers of pleasure rather than lovers of God. So we have a lot of categories here, or a lot of elements of this perilous times. And as we examine them in some detail, as opposed to just reading through them, we start to realize, hey, that's occurring right now. We're seeing that everywhere we look. It's occurring right now. So today, as we start this week, we're going to look at the 14th sign in those scriptures that I just read to you, which are the despisers of good. Well, we could summarize that probably right off the top with a simplistic response or simplistic revelation here. What is good today is now deemed evil, and what is evil today is now deemed good. We're seeing that everywhere we go. We could say it this way. What is right has become wrong, and what is wrong is accepted as right. Wow. Well, I want to give you a definition, a much more expanded definition of what despisers of good really does mean, because the Greek word that is translated despisers of good, here's an extended definition. This is a land where the laws and the regulations seem to primarily defend and protect the offender.
Hey, this is Matt from Insights to the End Times. I wanted to interrupt just for a quick moment and ask you to do us a huge favor. If you could go ahead and hit the like, share, or subscribe button, it would allow us to make sure that you stay up to date with all the latest videos from Dr. Scott. Now back to the episode.
Those who are immoral or evil, as opposed to protecting the rights of good people. This leaves the good people with no defense. Now, isn't that exactly where we are today? If you're following anything that's going on in our countries today, this is what we're seeing. We're seeing people who make statements that are normally considered to be horrendous statements, horrific statements, and they're making them as if they're good and as if they're right. Oh my goodness. The courts of our land are leaning in this same direction, it seems. I've been following this closely. I'm a former lawyer. I practiced for many years. And I am somewhat familiar with the way the law works and how lawyers work and how courts work and so on. But what I studied in law school and what's occurring in our system today, it's two different things. It really is two different things. And to stay abreast of what's occurring in the systems today, it's like, wow, does this mean I have to throw out my own value system? in order to adapt and accept what's going on? It seems to be the case. Now, what I want to suggest to you is that law-abiding citizens today are becoming an endangered species because the courts are leaning more in favor of the offender or the criminal than they are the victim. I'm a newspaper reader. I always have been. And I like a couple of newspapers that have a national status in our country and a well-written and well-reasoned viewpoints. But I guess that depends on where you're coming from to begin with. Are you coming from a center position or from a left-leaning position or a right-leaning position? Now, what's interesting about that distinction is that the scriptures tell us that we're going to see the sheep and the goats separated, with the sheep on the right hand and the goats on the left hand. And it goes on to say that those who are on the right hand will enter in, and those on the left hand will be denied entrance. So it's just kind of an interesting scenario in Scripture that we have right-leaning viewpoints and left-leaning viewpoints. And for the most part in our society, the right-leaning viewpoints have tended to be correct, right, good, moral, and the left-leaning many times have been progressive, and they bend the rules more. Now, you may or may not agree with that, but there's always significance in some of these statements. Anyways, what I want to get at is that when I was studying in law school, a person who was accused of a crime or an offense, they were deemed to be innocent according to the legal system until they could be proven guilty. That's where the prosecuting attorneys came in, prosecuting lawyers. They had to prove that the person was guilty or that the offense had occurred or the damage had been done. But it seems today the scales of justice have shifted such that if you are the accused today or the criminal today or the offender today, you're deemed to be innocent. You're deemed to be guilty until you can prove your innocence. So I'm seeing this a lot with the what we call the Me Too movement, where you have sexual allegations of mistreatment and abuse and so on being made by people, not just in the last few weeks, but they're going back 30, 40, 50 years to talk about it. And so the person who is being accused and is called the offender, they're not given the position of being innocent until proven guilty. They're deemed to be guilty because the Me Too movement says, hey, they did this. Oh, that's got to be accurate. They got to prove their innocence. The reports that I've been recently reading in the newspaper, because this is in the news quite a bit here in Canada, are talking about how the rights of the criminal have more merit with the court than the rights of the victim. And so that the victims who are being hurt and so on, they're left out in the desert. While the criminal, we get a report, they had a horrible youth. Oh, they grew up in a bad side of town. Oh, they were exposed to a lot of bad things. We can't condemn them because look at their background. Look what they went through. No merit or thought is even given to the victim whose life has been turned upside down. Wow, bad. It's something else. So I know we could probably summarize this in one or two statements and we could move on, but then we end up with our heads in the sand and we're not even aware of what's going on. In fact, one of the things that has bogged down the Christian community over the many, many years is most Christian believers have a very limited worldview. They don't pay attention to what's going on in the world. They don't pay attention to the issues in the world. They are very happy to essentially have their head buried in the sand. Don't bother me with details. Don't bother me with facts. None of them are touching me. It's not affecting me. I don't want to even know about it. Let the other people deal with that, not me. And I found this to be the case for many, many years. So it's not just a personal point of view. I've seen this over and over again. In fact, I'll give you one quick illustration. I was talking to a very, very well-read and very well-connected individual not too long ago. And I mentioned the MAID program, which is Medical Assistance in Dying. If you were listening to our podcast last week, you heard us talking about it. And they said to me, what are you talking about? What are you talking about? And I said, what do you mean, what am I talking about? You don't know what this is? They said, we haven't heard about it. I said, it was introduced here in Canada in 2016, and it's been in operation, and it's resulting in a lot of people using the program for having medical assistance in death. They're being put to sleep. They're being euthanized, in other words. Oh, I haven't heard a thing about it. And I was like, how can that be? Anyways, moving right along. My wife was an educator. She was a teacher. And over the years of university and so on, she obtained 3 different degrees from the university, 2 of them in education. And so she had 2 bachelor's degrees and 1 master's degree. And she went into teaching. And when she began her teaching career, it was common knowledge that a student had to pass the exams or the tests in order to be promoted to the next grade. And a passing grade was 51% or higher. So they had to get at least half the questions right. And she was teaching some primary grades, which are little guys. And even amongst them, there would be 1 or 2 that she'd have to hold back and have them go through another year of that class because they hadn't passed the test or risen to the level of being promoted. Along the way, she stepped down from teaching to look after our own kids and began homeschooling them. And she found that worked well. So as a result, she and a couple of others formed and created a private schooling system, a private school. And it was based as a Christian private school. And they opened up grades, senior kindergarten through grade 8. So all the elementary grades. And they had a lot of students. And they followed the same procedure. You had to pass the tests. You had to get over 51% in order to be promoted. And they made sure that every student got promoted because they worked hard with them to make sure they understood the courses and the programs and how to study and how to pass. And they worked with the parents. And they had phenomenal success. But out in the public system, things were changing. And the change was, the children, we want to protect their self-worth. They're sensitive little people, and we've got to protect them. And we can't disappoint them, and we can't discourage them. We have to promote them, every one of them, no matter how they did on the tests or exams. In fact, the tests or exams were no longer being marked with numbers. It was, you did well, Johnny. You did great, Susie. So it soon became a case of everybody was being promoted, whether they had passed or not. The system changed. And the more the system changed, the more the parents wanted their kids to do extremely well, which would occur if they were in the public system, where accountability and responsibility was lessened. As a result, a lot of our kids that were in our school left and went back into the public system, where there was limited accountability, and so on. My wife became very discouraged by that because that's not the way it should be. So there was a shift, and it's continued to be a shift. In fact, now it's reached the university level, such that students, they can skip class and not go to class, even though a good portion of their final marks will be based on class attendance and class participation. They can come to the final exams, they haven't been in class, they don't really even know what's been studied or what's been taught, so their preparation is limited. They go into the exam, they don't do very well, and they get a failing grade. Well, that's not good for you if you're trying to get a degree and graduate. And so what a lot of these students have done is they've gone and complained to the head of the department, head of the whatever department it was. If it was mathematics, the head of the mathematics department, or whatever. And they go in and they say, we studied really hard, and we did all the assignments, and they failed us, and it's not fair. And we're not happy. We're going to protest this. And the head of the department ends up saying, I'm going to bring in the professor and find out what's going on. The professor's the one who gets chastised, gets reprimanded. The kids get a passing grade. University students get a passing grade when they didn't do any of the work, didn't do any of the studies, didn't write the exams well, didn't pass, should have been failed. But because the system's upside down now, they get passing grades. In fact, one instance I'm aware of, the professor was reprimanded to such an extent that he said, I'm done. I'm not going to do this anymore. I don't need this. System's not working. It's upside down. So despisers of good, this is occurring all across the board. We see it today in our 2026 time frame in leadership positions. There's a lot of this going on where they're despising the rules that have always been the rules, and they're bending the rules and taking them to different levels, and it's like, oh my goodness. So why does a criminal who has been convicted of a crime and has been sentenced to spend time behind bars, why are they being released by way of parole? Because it would be harsh on their self-worth. Why are the governments able to come against those who have a legal and valid right to protest against government decisions, being allowed to do things that have been unheard of in the past? We had a protest here during the years of COVID, and the government wasn't prepared to even sit down and talk to the protesters. So instead, they instructed the banks to seize their bank accounts. This is a violation of freedoms. This is a violation of rights. This is a despiser of what is good. So what results from all of this is a sense of hopelessness, and that's why people bury their heads in the sand. What difference does it make to us? We can't do anything about it. So rather than know what's going on and making statements and contacting those who are in some position of leadership, they just say, I'm not going to pay attention. I'm just going to let it go. Despisers of good is a very wide area that's attacking these scriptures and downplaying everything into a position of a lack of leadership, lack of morals, a lack of values, a lack of integrity. I've never seen anything like it. It exists all around us. It's absolutely amazing. Why? We're in the last days, and these are perilous times that we're dealing with. And I could go on and on and on and on. But I trust we shared enough with you to help you understand this is a sign of the end. See you later this week. Call you blessed. Amen.
Hey, thanks for watching this episode of Insights to the End Times. I hope you enjoyed it. If you'd like to get notified every time we release a new video, go ahead and hit that subscribe button right over here. Now, if you'd like to catch the previous episode, you can do that right here, or the entire playlist is right above, right here. Thanks for watching. We'll see you on the next episode of Insights to the End Times.